The mission of Urban Peace is really to help save the lives of the next generation. People can change. It's not once a gang member, always a gang member.
Prevention, intervention, and violence interruption.
We're a nonprofit social justice organization.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Fernando. So this series, we're exploring the work of Peacemakers and the effort on the front lines to reduce and prevent community-level violence. Intervention work in LA has a long history, and that's something that we want to explore. And gang intervention, as my guest Taco would say, is the best kept secret in LA. And so what we want to do is we want to shed some light on the role of Peacemakers, the work that they're doing behind the scenes, to let everybody know their key role in really generating community-based public safety. So today we're speaking with a longtime leader in the gang intervention movement here in LA, Ben Taco Owens. I know him as Taco for a long time. He's a solid brother, longtime partner, trainer, as well as works for different organizations, part of different coalitions, and really leads a lot of the efforts in South LA of keeping people together, keeping people communicated, and keeping people safe. So it's a pleasure to have Taco here with us today. It's an honor to have him be able to share some of his experiences and thoughts with us. And so with that, introduce Ben Taco Owens.
All right.
Taco, you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, good morning.
Background.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for the invite. This is something that we do on a regular basis, so it's not necessarily awkward, talking to you. But
that's right.
Right now, doing a few different things, but for the most part, I am a supervisor over at Advocates for Peace and Urban Unity, APU, where we're servicing a grid contract in South LA, and just dealing with the different dynamics of what intervention has evolved to, and basically, having the capacity to, reach out to some folks and keep the violence down. I'm also a Southern California Ceasefire Committee member, where we have a collaborative of community members and victims and people who really want peace in our communities on a broader level and a broader collaborative. And we network together throughout Southern California to see what our resources are and our network to be able to stop violence. And finally, I am the executive director of Deep Food Mentoring Group, based in Gardena, California, which is adjacent to Compton in South LA, where we provide services for the community. They want to get off drugs, or they need housing, or they want to get out of gangs, or if they just need some help, just life skills altogether. We're there for that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Taco. And this work, I've known you probably for like 13 years, and you've been in this work, I think, for longer than that, of course. But what made you get into work? Because gang intervention work, it's not easy. You're not going to make a lot of money off of it. But maybe if you want to share a little bit about why you got into this work and why it's so important to you.
I think I was drawn into the work by default. Within the gang culture, coming from gang culture. It has an element to have an ambassador or a ranker in every community, or a diplomat. So by me being a diplomat from my community, it kind of afforded me to have talks with other people from different communities. And the momentum behind 1992 with the peace treaty and some of the other things that were happening in 1992 kind of drew me to the work, at least on the infancy stages on how to do it and who to do it with. And I seen the effectiveness of it, how I had a voice and my people respected, the decisions or the representation that I was representing my community with and the people that I was having those conversations with. Kind of nominated me to, to be out there on the forefront, to have those peace talks, or to engage with different peacemakers and see how we can build this network system. And for the most part, it's been working, come a long way, but I think we've gained some ground. And I think the reason why I stuck around is because of seeing the difference that it makes, and being in the midst of it, meaning the war and all the other BS that came with the gang culture, to seeing it to be able to get diluted in the forms of the violence taking place, made me say it works. Intervention works.
I mean, well, we're glad you stuck it out because, you put in a lot of work over the years to help really change the dynamics at the community level and save lives. But you mentioned the 92 treaty. Like, where was Taco at in 92? What were you doing in 92? What was the mindset?
Well, 92, actually, the day that the riots kicked off in 1992, I actually was in court. I was in Beverly Hills court, and I had a ticket. Showed up, go whatever the judge was going to tell me. And as I was standing before the judge, the bailiff came over, whispered in his ear, and he turned around, looked at me, said, "Case dismissed." I didn't know what was going on, but it's a riot taking place. So I left, and as I'm headed back towards Gardena, I'm driving down Western and all these other different streets. I see these different cars coming back, and by this time I'm hearing it on the radio. But I see these cars with the smashed out front windshield and all kind of stuff. I see smoke. I kind of just drove right through it and went to Gardena and kind of went in the huddle with some folks from my community. And some of them was mounting up to go, do whatever everybody else is doing. And some was like, wanted some direction. And, at that time, pagers was going out. We didn't have cell phones, but people was beeping people. And, we was pretty much just saying, let's unite our efforts. And, just different meetings started taking place after that, and again, that was like the initial stages for me to be able to do that. It also was a pivotal point because in 1992 was the most deadliest year of all for gang members. Even after the riots throughout the summer, it was just a real bad year where more people were murdered in LA County than any other year noted. And so a lot of discussions on how to make that stop. It wasn't necessarily all gang violence. Some of the stuff was internal, some of it was random, some of it was unknown, but it was a bad year, but it was a year that folks were uniting and kind of figuring out who.
Yeah, over 1,000 homicides that year. And, more recently, maybe the last decade, we've been under 300, which is still too many. We want to get to zero, but how has it changed? I mean, from 92, where we had 1,000 homicides in 1 year, and then over the last 10 years in LA, excluding 2020, of course, we've seen violence rise in every city nationally. But what was the difference, and how has it evolved?
Well, just a small footnote. So the 1,000 was in the city of Los Angeles, and a lot of us that do the work, we kind of make the inclusion of every city that's in LA County. So we had over 2,000 homicides in the county. And 1,000 in the city, like you said. But yeah, that's a lot of people impacted, right? All those family members and friends associated with those 2,000 plus people killed. And again, just trying to figure out a way to determine who's with the peace movement, who's not, and reaching out to the right diplomats of those communities. Because you can have people that were uniting their forces for different reasons. Some people want to unite their forces because they're tired of getting beat up. There's some folks who want to make money, or some folks who just were tired altogether. But I think the momentum behind it was a unification throughout the city. To say there's a system here that's working against us, and we need to stop. Working against ourselves and working against the system.
All right. And so the change from then till now, you're talking about people, there's more diplomats, people who can represent their communities to come in and engage in conversation about what peace could look like. My understanding is the Southern California Ceasefire Committee, had a role in that and getting the breakfasts together between different communities. Can you maybe share a little bit? That's a very important history. Can you share a little bit of that?
Yeah, so the Southern California Ceasefire Committee kind of evolved as a result of gang homicides taking place amongst each other, and then the mothers and the families that were impacted by that. They said, "Hey, aren't you guys all the same? Aren't you all Crips?" And at this point, the gang banging between Crips and Bloods had evolved to Crips against Crips and Crips against Bloods or whoever you know. And so it had gotten to the point to where it was taking place right around the time that they were going to be having the execution of Tookie Williams, a prominent figure in the Crip world. And that kind of blended with seeking clemency for him from the death penalty. And, there was a lot of push forward and folks traveling up north, and a lot of things were taking place and the momentum was there. And we didn't want to have the oversight of the victims that were being killed here. So we kind of put it out there like, we'll grant me clemency too. Grant the dude that, live around the corner from you clemency. Grant our communities clemency and let them get it. And as a result, we began to say, there's things that we can fix, that we can talk out. There's things that if we network and find out what the problem is, or communicate on how to stop it, I think we'll get some traction. Nevertheless, Tookie was executed. They had his funeral at the same church where we would have our ceasefire meetings. So we had a lot of hands-on with the neighborhoods that were coming, the neighborhood where the funeral was taking place. And again, just begin to do that outreach and spell some rumors or some old beefs that didn't exist anymore. And that within itself allowed folks to come to the table, saying, "Hey, I've been wanting to come to the table, but, we were under the impression that it wasn't cool to be here." And so, again, having these conversations and begin to network, we begin to see a lot of the gang violence stop. So when we initially had our first ceasefire meetings, we were at a homicide rate of 1,146 people had been killed that first year. And then as we begin to see that we begin to meet, engage, and get resources out, and collaboration out, the homicides begin to fall every year, up until your point of when we talked about 300 in the city, close to 600 in the county. And so we attribute that to the networking system, to where folks didn't have to die, or if we had rumors out there to intervention. And so many people that got out there, did the great work, and put those fires out, or didn't afford the opportunity for retaliation of something that happened that didn't have anything to do with a different neighborhood, or innocent people had to die. And again, one is too many, but we strongly believe that the networking and the awareness that we getting out there to the communities definitely made an impact on those homicides.
Yeah, well, you've definitely been a leader in that, along with a lot of other brothers and sisters, some that are here and some that are not anymore. Rest in peace to those that have fallen. But, there's been an infrastructure around safety, like community safety, right? That network that you're talking about that's been built, right? So even after the peace treaty, looking at the breakfast with the Southern California Ceasefire Committee, and then even, some people rallying around Tookie, right? And so, as that has evolved, and I think that was in 2005 when that was going on with Tookie. But as that has evolved, where do you see intervention moving into post that period? How have you seen it evolve? What are the strengths, and kind of where are the areas that where we're still seeing some challenges?
So, I mean, as it evolved, it became more of a close-knit environment where folks are, again, they're talking, they're trusting. These are folks that have sat down and broke bread and had breakfast together. And then now they're at a point to where they trust each other and get to know each other. I think now based on those relationships that I often tell people that behaviors are contagious, and so it's peace. And so I think, when a good name travels far, and folks are aware that, hey, if this is real, this is a real person, those perceptions you had of that person aren't real. And then now, folks are buying into it. I think that's where we're at today. Folks can kind of like, you can identify who's real about the work and the misconception about who's doing it just to get the money. Because like you said, it's really not a money that you do. We're at a point, unfortunately, with this work that you might be better off just getting a minimum wage job,
Yeah.
And it's safer. As far as the benefits and making your community safer might differ, but at the end of the day, this is not a job that you want to consider if you want to get in there and get rich. Not that. I think it has to be, driven behind your love for your community and your people, and having the not just the intellect. This works require instinct. You have to know some things deep down within yourself that needs to happen or not happen, and it's not always based on the intellect or something that you get out of a book or out of a training. It has to be something that's built inside of you that manifests itself.
Yeah, you cut out there just at the end for a little bit, but I think you talk also about the lived experience, right? You have that instinct of what to do because you have kind of that experience and reading some of that dynamics that are occurring on the street, how people are moving, etc. There's a lot of talk about the work now with the federal government, specifically talking about community intervention, talking about federal funds that can be routed to support this work. What do you see as some of the challenges for the field? As here we are in LA, we have a demonstrated history of success with gang intervention, right? We have evaluations. One is like, how come you think it's not funded where it needs to be? Like you said, like this you're going to be lucky if you make a living wage doing this job. And then two is, the field, now that money has come out, the field is getting actually more crowded. You're starting to see more and more people saying, hey, we train gang intervention workers, or I started gang intervention. I guess if you wanted to share any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, and here's, I guess, my dirty confession. I've been a troll before. So I would go to these different websites and kind of like read the comments and things like that. And based on just what I've seen or heard when we hear anything about gangs or gang intervention, and see some of the comments, I don't think that it was real, or it may not be as big as how we view it. It's kind of like our baby is our machine, and we get this love for it. But I don't think everyone else necessarily sees it that way. And you would see comments like, or just put all the gang members on the island and kill themselves, or why would we fund something that is not real or it's not healthy? So those type of comments or sentiments, I believe, do exist, not just because they're on a computer screen or a comment section, but there's probably people that actually feel it like they don't care. It's not them. It doesn't impact them. It's not in their community. And so why should money be put or placed there? But I do think that as time has gone on, that it does show a benefit collectively, if nothing else, if not for their community, for humanity, for the sake of lives being impacted and changed as a result of intervention. There's a lot of lives saved that probably won't ever get noted. People
Right.
might not attribute it to, those intervention strategies or techniques that took place. But I think we're at a pivotal point now, because intervention has gone beyond just the gang member, and we're talking about real people whose lives are impacted, and communities that are changed because of the work that the interventionist responds to or delves himself into. Hey, let's say if there's no gang violence going on, then guess what? We're gonna still go check on or 82-year-old lady who's vulnerable to COVID, and make sure she got masks and hand sanitizer. So those type of things, it kind of it segues them into community activism as a whole. Whether it's the graffiti or some other issues that are going on in the neighborhood. If it's not just all gang violence, which is just a fraction of
Right.
community perils, but if there's nothing that's going on, then they take it to the next level. How else can I help? The gang stuff died down. What else can I do to help? That's what I see.
Yeah. And I think it's noted, and I mean, part of the reason we want to engage in these conversations is just to really expose the general public more to the work of intervention and how important it is. And I think you're right. You talk about from a humanitarian perspective, just as a human being, this work is important. What do you think is preventing maybe local governments from really investing and paying kind of more than a living wage and really investing in this work as something that is that broadens the idea of public, because a lot of times public safety just be seen, that's a law enforcement thing. But what we're proving here in LA is that no, the community has a huge role in public safety. And just look at the field of intervention and how important they have been to ensuring safety in LA.
Well, I think again, to your point, public safety and law enforcement have been synonymous. It's like one and the same. But protecting the safety or making the public safer is a duty of the peacemaker. And I think sometimes when we talk about government funding, is to really try to find a way to break it down to the impact of the work that's done. And again, starting off back in the years with Connie Rice, we would use the term of gang intervention and sanitizing it. How do you make it look sexy or attractive? Because anything that had anything to do with gangs were also synonymous with violence and crime. And so you get violence and crime / gangs, and then you get public safety, synonymous with law enforcement. And they kind of like, well, this is how we're going to deal with this issue. But now, fast forward, we're at an era where we do have a tool. The tool is intervention, and it's effective. I think communicating that through or to government without stepping on anybody's toes, the effectiveness of it, and a lot of that we understand is data driven. Show me the money or show me the data, and I think we're able to do that now. And compliments to yourself, UPI, Connie Rice, of course, who have been able to help us build this apparatus to say, hey, this works, and this is how it works, and this is why it's needed even more. So I think we're turning the corner on that. We're getting a lot of public officials that get to witness it hands-on, wherever you go to the districts or, wherever they might be. We have the luxury of actually knowing them personally and them seeing the change that takes place when we have intervention in these different communities.
Yeah, I mean, and you all have seen the brunt of it, on the front lines and dealing with that, while you're also navigating some of the political relationships. I think importantly, the one with law enforcement as well. So I just wanted to touch on this one. I was talking to some brothers that were, kind of key players down in South LA, in certain areas of South LA, and they were talking about, well, does intervention, they work with cops, and are they snitches, this and that. And, we had to engage in that conversation. Maybe if you could share a little bit about the role of intervention, and then what, the role of law enforcement, what interactions, take place, where are the firewalls to kind of separate the role of law enforcement from gang intervention?
Well, I think professionalizing intervention kind of like put us in a place to where we can still be ourselves and still look like ourselves. And most other professions, if they have the uniform on, then that's kind of like how you identify them. Cop uniform on must be a cop. The doctor's uniform on must be a doctor. Interventionist, you can't tell if they're active gang member or if they're, a peacemaker or whatever their role might be. But I think the notion that a person can interact with law enforcement um, and might possibly be disclosing some of the gang culture to that law enforcement probably puts people at unease to where they're not, necessarily comfortable. However, if you're the right person, of, with the right relationships in those communities, there's transparency here. This work is transparency through intervention. There's nothing that you need to hide. I've actually found myself being told to go talk to law enforcement on the behalf of different communities than I have. Like, why are you talking to them? But again, that comes through transparency. You don't have anything to hide. But you can anticipate that, you're doing this work and people don't really understand or know the work. Yeah, they're going to question you, why are you so chummy with law enforcement? Or why do you have these relationships? And I think in part is because when you get to know people, then those perceptions disappear. It's rather me, coming from the gang culture and knowing law enforcement change my perception of them, and probably likewise. So I think the community of folks who are just watching intervention and concerned, well, what are they telling them that they don't already know? Sometimes people just really don't understand and think that somebody could have told on them, but you go on social media, exposing yourself to the world with your crimes. So I think we're safe in that regard. I haven't, to my many years of travel and doing this work, heard of an interventionist telling on anybody or snitching on anybody, having anybody sent to prison. I've never heard of that. Not to say that you may be able to find somebody that probably have done something like that, but in all actuality, you'll probably find more people who aren't interventionists that have done something against the culture than those who have. But again, and that kind of goes along with the work, the nature of the work, and being involved with it and exposing yourself to information that you probably don't want to know about, but that you definitely wouldn't be able to share. But I think in doing this work, you kind of know that. But such as myself and probably many other interventionists, we have a track record, being arrested, going to jail, doing time, things like that. So usually, if you suspect coming in the door, you're probably going to be still suspect, if you're at the table. So I think again, your record coming into this work kind of speaks volumes, and the trust with the community and other gang members that that you're safe with them, that they're safe with you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I mean, that's also part of the standards, right? The standards of conduct and practice for intervention is, where you draw those lines, which is reinforced and what's trained to, right, in the academy, the LA Violence Intervention Training Academy. So we're getting back to a time now where people are say they're getting pulled over and they're claiming to be intervention workers now. Again, I'm starting to hear a little bit of that now, or people claiming to be intervention workers and going around saying that they've been doing the work for 80 years and they might be like 80 years old. How do you kind of ensure that? Well, I guess one is maybe some of that history would be good. Is in LA we use the idea of license to operate. From your understanding, I mean, how did that term evolve? And you're talking about your license to operate, right? The credibility that an intervention worker has to go into the community and to put out fires. And there's a quote that you shared in the LA Times a long time ago: is intervention has to go into the fire, put it out, and come out without smelling smoke, right? And that has a lot to do with your license to operate. So maybe if you could share a little bit about that, the importance of credibility and maybe the origins of that concept of license to operate.
Yeah, my first time hearing that, I think I was at Brown Institute in around 2004. but I heard it from a mentor of mine named Howard Hewitt, and how he had broken down with it having the capacity, to get you access to the community and get you resources, and to be able to put those fires out. And basically, it gives us when we hear it, we can reflect and see how do we fit in there? How do we qualify for that? Is that something that we have? It's not something that we always just know that we have. It's something that we really have to reflect and say, can I do that? Do I have the capacity to operate at that level? And once you realize that, because you have to run these different scenarios through your mind, and I get access, get permission. Am I nominated to do it? And maybe all these different faces come across your screen inside your head, like, yeah, okay, I'm good to go. But that lived experience is kind of like a fortifier, because when you see that you have that capacity to do that, it basically becomes off of your track record, or off of the fact that they trust you, they rely on you, and they give you that permission, access. We use the analogy of a driver's license in different scenarios, and obtaining it, you can lose it, or it can be counterfeit. And so this work is so broad in its respect that there's a lot of people that can say that they do it, and they probably do. I mean, I don't necessarily call myself a mechanic, but I work on my car, I'm doing mechanic work. I'm not a certified mechanic, but there are people who can put fires out, people who can save lives, and people who can do intervention work. But is that their day in and day out profession? Probably not. People that can commit crimes and still save lives. Probably so. There's a verse somewhere that says that the power of life and death is in the tongue. Somebody can say something and stop. Somebody can say something and it can stop. So yet having that full ownership of intervention, I don't think we're there yet, because there's so many practices of it. But in the professional point of having intervention around, I think that LA is kind of like leading the charge. And meaning to say this, so we used to use the analogy of Kobe Bryant and Kobe Brown, both of them awesome, dynamic basketball players. They can beat anybody at the best of the best. But there's a difference between them. And the difference was that Kobe Bryant got paid for what he did. Kobe Brown just hung out at the park, played good basketball. So being a professional at the work that you do kind of sets you aside. Doesn't mean that someone else who does it is not good at it, but when someone is willing to compensate you for the work that you do, kind of puts you in a different category.
Right. Well, that's a good point. What do the field's moving, it's moving forward. It's going to evolve. We've had conversations with folks on like social media right now is playing a big role in some of the violence on the streets. Where do you see the field evolving into, and what are some of the biggest challenges that you think we face?
The field evolving into putting us in a better place. I think it's even better that more people want to be interventionists, and even if it is for the money, they won't be able to last if it's not genuine. A wolf can only hide so long with cheap clothing. Kind of get hot up under that wool, make you take it off. But I see if it's becoming more attractive to be a peacemaker, aside from the dollars, which I believe that the money should be there. But I think if people are drawn to it and are actually doing the work, we're going to see our communities place. We should see the violence going down. we should see more lives being saved and more lives being empowered and enhanced, finding things better to do than being in a gang or prison. I think it's just a matter of just tapping into those people like yourselves and so many other people out there that want to do the work, want to get involved, creating an opportunity. Sometimes it's just not an opportunity. You don't want folks to be volunteering, volunteering their lives. And I think the last time that I checked, that was called a slave. You want people to work for free forever and make a difference. And I think, getting to the point to where folks can actually get paid for the great work that they do will be more inspiring and motivating to them, and we'll get more people on board.
Yeah, so I mean that's something that we're pushing for hard is more higher wages for intervention workers. Right now, it's still at like $33,000 a year starting salary. So the mayor's State of the City address, he said we want to value intervention workers, we want to pay them more, etc. And now we have to see it, right? See it to believe it. But over the years, you've been through it in the street, been through the different challenges that our communities have faced. What role do you see Peacemakers playing kind of moving forward? We have folks that are involved in doing homeless outreach, folks that are involved in doing community health work, of course, as intervention workers, as case managers, as working at hospitals. Where do you see folks from the community moving into if we can develop these career pathways?
I would say in a fairy tale world, those occupations you just named is where we need interventionists, because that means that gangs are just kind of like they're dying out and people are becoming more identified as humans, citizens, and still needing those social services. I think we're going to always need those services, but I think hopefully as we begin to segue and change people's lives, that it's not going to be more so gang issues that we have to deal with, more aspiring issues to make them better people, to make sure that they have all the needs that are afforded to them, and hopefully their gangs won't be at the top of the menu when we wake up in the morning. Tell somebody not to be in the gang, because it's probably more attractive a peacemaker than it is to be somebody that's waking up to going out to hurt somebody.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when we're talking about peacemakers or intervention workers, violence interrupters, street outreach, there's a bunch of names I think for street outreach. In LA, we use gang intervention, of course, and we've been throwing out peacemakers. But if you were to define for the general public that maybe doesn't know what we mean about what we mean when we say a gang intervention worker or a peacemaker, can you maybe share your thoughts on what that definition would be for folks that are listening?
I think intervention is kind of, to me, is exclusively connected with gang intervention. I think peacemaker is more broader on a bigger scale. More might even be connected to some type of spiritual nexus of why people do their work or their assignment or commission is from. But I do see us getting to the point to where intervention does transition more so to activism or advocate. And you can still be we talk about peacemaker, but you also need a peacekeeper, because there's more to keeping it than it is making it. You can have those relationships starting, and then the maintenance piece is what we need to peacekeepers. But again, just based on what we've heard about peacemakers and peacekeepers, we have to define that and set that narrative if that's what we are. Because again, in past tense, we might see what a peacekeeper is somebody that doesn't necessarily look like us or dress like us or act like us. But we have to begin to change who we are and what our functions are.
Right. So it's definitely going to evolve. This will be the last question, and then we'll start to wrap it up. Is there's also a need to get younger intervention workers, right, to kind of mentor, recruit, and bring in some new folks in. What message would you give to people that are considering being a peacemaker, and why is it important for them to become part of this peace movement in LA?
Well, I would say expect to learn something that you don't know. I've talked to countless of interventionists that even when we talk about training and how the expectation when you talk about training, what are you going to teach me that I don't already know? And a lot of times that could save you from learning anything at all, because I believe that the more that you know, the more you realize what you don't know. And so for those young peacemakers that are coming aboard and getting a taste of the nectar, just kind of find you a mentor, somebody that, has traveled down that road. And you can learn from that person, because they say experience is the best teacher. It doesn't have to be your experience. You don't have to go to prison like that. You don't have to get shot. You don't have to do all these different other things to wait for the right opportunity to get involved with peace. Like bless her heart, Vicki Lindsay, rest in peace. Get involved in not force. And so, I would just suggest, surround yourself with people that are headed in your direction. Traveling that.
For sure. Okay, this is for real. Is the last question. Why is it important to fund Peacemakers?
Well, it's important to fund Peacemaker because it is an antidote to the violent crimes that are taking place. It is an antidote to saving lives, and it's only fair that we ask, that we are saving lives, and folks should be compensated for the great work. I mean, you put a price tag on the life that you save, especially if it's yours or your son, your daughter. What price tag is that? And nobody's asking to become rich off of it. It's just livable wages. I mean, something that we can sustain the future too, and be live the part of that so-called American dream, home, and things that other people share. So I think it's important because it's needed, and I think it's important because it works and it's saving lives.
Amen. Thank you, Taco, for joining us. Appreciate the time you took with us, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you, brother.
All right. Thank you, brother. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.